So it's a real treat to chat with Jeff. Jeff and I are actually sort of neighbors in San Francisco, but are just meeting for the first time here in Singapore. Jeff is the CEO of Twilio, which he's been for, is it 15, 16?
15 years, yeah. We launched 15 years ago next week.
Awesome. It's a long time in the tech world. And you've been a public company for 7 years or something?
7 years, yep.
Which very impressive. Maybe you can start by giving everyone just an overview on what Twilio is and does.
Yeah, absolutely. So Twilio is a customer engagement company. We've got APIs that allow software developers and companies that are digital companies to go build amazing customer engagement into all the applications and experiences that you're building. So what does that mean? Well, we started off with APIs that allow developers to build communications into their products. Voice calls, text messaging, emails, etc. Basically every form of communication that companies use to talk to their customers, we've got the leading APIs for. Then, a few years ago, we bought the leading customer data platform, a company called Segment. Because what they do is they allow you to take all this data from all your various systems, things that developers are always asked to do, which is, hey, how do I get data out of these systems and pull it into a usable format so I can really know my customers via the data and build profiles about customers. And so we have the leading platform to do that. Now we're bringing together communications and customer data to enable companies to have more effective engagement with their customers, because you know your customers, then you can communicate with them better. And that creates this virtuous cycle. You know, the better you know your customers, the more effective you are at communicating with them. The more effective you are, the more likely they are to open your mobile app or go to your website. And when you do, click, 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 you get more data about who they are, what their behaviors are, gives you a better understanding of them, which allows you to be more effective. And great digital companies really are built on this flywheel of knowing your customer and then doing a great job of engaging with them. And so that's what Twilio is doing. We're, as you said, 15 years old, about $4 billion of revenue, and really excited. We just held our conference, actually, for the very first time in Singapore earlier this week. So,
very cool. And we're talking about hyper-personalization here. You touched on it a little bit, but can you talk about some of the interesting things that your companies are doing with AI now?
You know, it's interesting because historically, AI was generally just predictive use cases, right? And a lot of folks have various models that they built to predict various things like lifetime value, churn predictions, things like that. And now, though, you're looking at what generative AI can do. And everybody is looking at what the generative AI capabilities that are out there and saying, wow, if we have access to these language models, what could we build? And I truly believe that language models are going to absolutely just revolutionize how companies operate, and not in the way people are talking about today. So I don't know about you, this is a debate. In fact, we were having this debate backstage. I believe that language models have the ability to reason. I look at some of the problems people have given language models. Like, did you see that Microsoft research study where they were like, they asked the language model, like, you have a dozen eggs and a plate, and like a toaster oven or something. They're like, can you balance these? And it figured out, it was like, yeah, I'd put the dozen eggs down first and then the plate on top of it to distribute the weight evenly, and then the toaster oven goes on top. You're like, yeah, that's reasoning. We don't know how it works. We don't know how these work either, but it does seem to exhibit the same properties of reasoning. And so now when you think about the fact that this is a statistical model, yes, but the outcome of all of this is a computer that can reason at a high level. And until today, the only things on the planet that were able to reason at this level were human beings, and now a machine can do it. And that's GPT-4, let alone GPT-5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, right? And so when I look at it, I'm like, okay, we have invented computers that can reason. Now what's possible? And I was talking to Sam Altman, actually at our conference, and it's fascinating because he said it perfectly. He said, I think the result of this is going to be the cost of intelligence falls by a factor of 1 million. So think about that for a second. Let that sink in. If the cost of intelligence falls by a factor of 1 million, what's now possible? And when I look at it, I'm like, okay, so first of all the things that human beings do to go touch a customer, to make the customer successful for any kind of company, you're like, that's going to be automated. In fact, the entire front office of a company can be completely automated, but the thing that you will need to do that is an understanding of the customer. So if you give an AI access to everything your customers have ever done, every click, every scroll, every purchase, every return, every customer service conversation, everything they've ever done, can that AI now reason about what the company should go do? And so the first and obvious use case is, okay, well, customer service or sales conversations that a company has with their customer, that can be fully automated. I mean, how many people didn't use ChatGPT for the first time and say, first of all, mind blown, and then second, wait, isn't this going to be how I chat with companies going forward? So that's an obvious one. Less obvious is, I think AI is going to design marketing campaigns. Because you'll be able to say, like, we already have a product in the market where you just describe the marketing campaign you want to run. You just say, hey, I want to have a marketing campaign that targets users who have an item in their shopping cart and haven't bought yet, and with Google Ads. And if they haven't, and 3 days later, hit them up again. And AI will say, okay. It'll go design the marketing campaign. It'll design the whole decision tree. It'll go select all the right customers for that campaign, and it'll start executing it. And you're like, that used to be teams of people would have to go and have the idea and go, the data team had to go get data from which customers, and then a design team had to design the emails, and people had to write the emails, and then some marketer had to drag and drop all the boxes. And now it's just going to be asking the AI to go do it for you. And this isn't hypothetical. We have this today. Now, where all this is going, the other thing we've built, which I think is amazing, if you have a customer-aware AI, meaning an AI that knows everything your customers have ever done, it can have those insights for you. The marketer doesn't even have to have the idea. It'll say, hey, did you know that customers who bought this category of products are 48% more likely to buy this category of product? Do you want me to create a cross-sell campaign? Yes. It'll do the whole campaign. We already have this. So now you think about, okay, where's this going? Most companies, when I talk to them, I say, how many simultaneous marketing campaigns are you running? How many journeys? Most companies, it's a few hundred. Pretty sophisticated companies are a few thousand. Well, I think companies are going to have millions, tens of millions, if not billions of simultaneous marketing campaigns running, with AI having hypotheses, spinning up those marketing campaigns, killing the ones that don't work, growing the ones that do, and constantly evolving it. In fact, it'll have probably 100 marketing strategies for each and every one of us for what might work in terms of tickling our imagination and getting us to be more happy, loyal customers. And I think this is the future. And if that's a scary thing, and I say that vision to a lot of people, and they're like, whoa, that's scary. How would I manage it? Well, how you manage it just changes. You're not looking at each campaign by campaign. No one is sitting there babysitting the campaign and saying, is it working? Let me look at the metrics today. No, the tooling will just change massively. In fact, you're just going to feed it data on one side, be looking at results on the other side, and you'll be tuning. You'll be saying, oh, I wonder if I introduce this new source of data. Is that going to help it or hurt it? And you're going to be tuning these things, but I liken it to the cloud migration. Right? So you remember 2005, right? How many of you were not alive, I guess, but building technology in 2005, right? You had servers and you knew their names and you could go touch them. They were in your data center and you cared about them. And when they ran out of disk space, you were like, oh my God, someone's got to log in and clean up the disk space, right? Well, along came AWS and Werner Vogels, and he said, you know what, today you treat your servers like they're pets. And in fact, you're going to treat them like they're cattle. There's just tons of them, and they're coming, and they're going, and you don't know their names, and you don't really care about them. And this is going to be a change, and they're going to be constantly, they're ephemeral resources. And at any one point in time, I don't know about your companies, but at Twilio, there's probably 10,000 servers getting booted and 10,000 servers getting shut down, and in various stages of that, right? And so it's completely changed how we manage our tech infrastructure. This idea that there's ephemeral resources, and now you get things like Kubernetes that allow you to manage vast swaths of technology resources that are basically getting scheduled and torn down and set up. Well, so many domains like marketing is going to work like that too. Marketing campaigns will stop being a precious thing. They will become a ephemeral thing that AI is managing, and you're kind of feeding the AI the right information to allow it to do its job, and you're looking at the outcome. In fact, I think the end state of all this, actually, are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
I think the end state is people are going to give AI business goals, and the AI will be able to reason through how to achieve them. So for example, we all have OKRs probably, right? You've got objectives, you give your teams. Well, I think you'll be able to give AI OKRs. You'll be able to say something like, let's imagine you're like a clothing retailer. You could say, hey, get rid of last season's inventory by the end of the week, but make as much profit as possible. And an LLM, given all the information about your inventory, your customers, it can develop a pricing, a markdown strategy, marketing campaigns, and it will move the inventory for you. And because if you think through it, you're like, can I just give it an objective? You're like, that seems impossible. But then when you think through, actually, what's the reasoning required to achieve that? You're like, well, I get it. Yeah, you have a markdown strategy. You target the right customers. You know, what's the right discounting? You're like, can an LLM do all those things? Like, yeah, I bet it can. Or a combination of generative and predictive AI brought together could achieve all those things? Absolutely. And I don't think that's far off. I think that's in the next probably less than 5 years.
So there's this debate in the AI community about regulation. And some people are just complete AI accelerationists, and some are now called decelerationist. Where do you fit on the spectrum?
You know, it's interesting. I was in Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago talking to various folks, because there's a very active debate, of course, among legislators about what kind of regulation, if and what kind of regulation there should be. Most people agree that there should be some kind of regulation, but there's a lot of debate on what kind. And the thing I observed, you know, the canonical use case that a lot of people talk about with AI is things like, well, what if the AI has a bias? In fact, we just saw the presentation as one of the things. What if an AI has bias, and therefore you get biased outcomes? Like, take financial services. In most countries, it is illegal to have a bias in terms of the financial services products that you offer. Right? If you had higher interest rates for one group versus another, systemically, that would be illegal. It would be discrimination. And so a lot of people say, well, what if you're using AI to come up with, like, say, pricing strategies, and they have a bias, that'd be bad. And I'm like, absolutely. But the thing is, we already have laws that say you can't discriminate. If the tool they're using changes, it used to be an Excel spreadsheet and now it's AI, that doesn't change the outcome that they're still held accountable to. So I think you already have a lot of laws about what we as a society want the outcome to be. If we use different tools to run our companies, we are still accountable for the outcomes. However, there's a caveat I would give to that. So I think you don't want to legislate or regulate how it works, but you do want to continue to be hyper-focused on the outcome. However, you can't operate at the speed we've historically operated at. If you're a regulator, and like your way of understanding if there's a problem in the market is, you get a tip from a whistleblower and you go do an investigation and then a big press release and you haul the executives in front of some regulatory body, and that happens generally speaking on the scale of years. That's too slow, because AI will evolve so quickly that the harm done to people, if there is, say, for example, bias, to use that example, that would be a very bad outcome for society if it took years to figure out that there's a bias. And so I think what is going to happen is that you're going to have adversarial AI. One AI, for example, creating the pricing strategy for, say, a bank when interest rates offer, for example. And another AI who's there to answer the question, is there bias in what's going on in the first AI? And then the regulators, I think, should take great interest in the second AI.
Yep.
I'd like to say the regulators should actually be the ones to build that AI, but I think that's probably a bit aggressive. But I think companies, for example, who want to deploy AI should be held accountable for, you need to prove to the regulator that you have an adversarial model that will catch errors in the first model. And you need to regularly prove to the regulator that adversarial model, that cross-check, is actually functioning. And that's the thing. And the regulators then should look at the outcome of that AI on a daily, hourly, or real-time basis. Because you can't wait a year and ask for the annual report at the pace at which this technology is moving. And so I think something along those lines will be the answer to how we end up allowing this technology to have amazing outcomes. Because I think that AI is going to make companies 10 times more effective at what they do. Like, and you can frame that in like almost any way what they do, but like basically serving customers, bringing products to market. I think companies can get 10 times better at that at 1/10 of the cost they are at today. And if you think about that, this is like, give or take directionally a 100 times improvement in companies' performance. The financial incentive and the societal incentive to take advantage of this technology is going to be so strong. There will be so much incentive for people to invest in this technology because of the ability to drive better outcomes. But therefore, we have to be ready. And we have to be ready with a structure that mirrors the pace at which this technology is evolving.
Makes a lot of sense. So we have a couple questions that are about, people are asking, am I going to be out of a job? What does this mean for me? So rather than answering specifics, maybe you said, Sam Altman says the price of intelligence goes down by a millionfold. So what does that mean for teams? What does that mean for your team, and what does that mean for the companies that you serve? What's going to change?
We tend to look at these changes through the lens of how things work today. And when those changes come out, we kind of think about, well, what does that mean for me or for my view of the world? And that can be a scary change, absolutely. And I'm not like a technology absolutist. I do not believe that every technology is like for the better, or even if it's not. Like I don't know if this is a popular thing to say here or not, but I was not a fan of the blockchain. I think it's a solution in search of a problem. I didn't get booed off stage. Great. A FinTech conference. So I'm not someone who's just always like every technology is progress. But in the case here, I think that an abundance of intelligence is a net positive for humanity. In the same way, and my parallel here is in the Industrial Revolution, right? You got an abundance of physical labor. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, humans or some other animal were needed for every physical act that was needed for humanity's benefit, right? So farming, for example, lots of labor, lots of people, lots of animals required to plow the fields, to plant seeds, to harvest, all that kind of stuff. Well, obviously along came mechanization, and you now have an abundance of physical labor. And so farms got much more efficient. They needed far fewer people and far fewer animals and far fewer things to feed and far fewer, it got so much more efficient, and because of that, we can now feed billions of people on this planet. And what happened to all the people who used to work in farms? Well, generally speaking, that resulted in the rise of cities, of urbanization, of different categories of jobs that arose, more intellectual pursuits. And so the net positive to society, I think we'd all sit here today and say, yeah, it seems like a positive outcome for society versus, the agriculture-oriented economies of, say, the 18th century. And so now, I think there'll be a similar thing. And I think it's, if you ask someone pre-industrial revolution, could you imagine skyscrapers and desk jobs and the internet? Of course, they wouldn't be able to predict those things. In the same way that I think it is hard today for us to predict what might a society look like with an abundance of intelligence. But I think, I do take a little bit of a trust leap here that as the abundance of intelligence kicks in, things will evolve, and that society will be the net benefit of that. And each of us will be able to engage in pursuits that are more, that are worthwhile to us.
Looking forward to that future. This has been awesome, and I feel like I could talk about this with you for a really long time, but we're getting the cue that time's up. So thank you very much. It's been awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Great to be here.